What I have done is chosen 5 countries to compare their GPU prices to GPU prices in the United States, based on how many of you guys watch this channel by country. I expected most of these countries to be quite a bit higher because, well, we are comparing to America, but I didn't expect RTX 4000 to be cheaper in Canada, nor did I expect the UK to be this bad. But overall, the 5 countries that we're looking at today, they are on average either 12.5% more expensive or 21.5%, depending on how you look at it, with Canada being the closest in price to the United States of Freedom, and India being so bad you might as well fly to another country and enjoy a holiday with that cost difference. Maybe Germany or Australia. Because today we are answering several questions, mainly what are prices like outside of the United States, and how much better or worse are they compared to American prices. And as an added bonus for you, at the end of this video, I'm also going to tell you the best value GPUs for each region and potentially beyond, because there's a few GPUs that show up in the top 5 best value GPUs in every single country, including the US. And now that I've lived in the States for nearly 5 years now, I thought it'd be fun to throw in some of my personal observations living here, for the Americans or any of you curious enough to know what it's like. Some things are better and some things are literally backwards. Let me explain. So you're thinking about an upgrade, but prices are holding you back. Well, there's 2 ways that I can help you out with that. You can either offset the cost by selling what you currently own, or even make your upgrade more affordable with today's video sponsor, Jawa. Jawa is an online marketplace specifically designed for gamers by gamers, where users and listings are pre-approved to make sure that buyers are not being taken advantage of and prices are fair, which I think we can all get behind. But what if you want to make money instead? Well, sellers can also benefit in a number of ways. Jawa takes a smaller fee compared to eBay, and will even outright buy your graphics card from you if you need a quicker, hassle-free sale. But these are only my favourite features of the platform. They also have a vibrant community, commission builds, and a 4.7 Trustpilot rating. So what are you waiting for? Make your next upgrade more affordable by clicking on the Jawa sponsor link below. Starting out with the second most popular country by TechLens viewership, which is the UK, and originally where I am from, which is a good place to share with you guys my first observation about America, which is extremely relevant here. I'm sure that most of you guys are used to looking at the price of something, going to the counter, and then paying that price. In the US, that almost never happens, as taxes are not included in the list price. You then add mandatory tip culture to that, and something like going to a restaurant can end up costing you 30–40% more than what you ordered. It's quite a bit of a shock for somebody coming from a place with tax included, and tips being more of a special thanks for somebody that did a good job, which is what it's like in the UK. Speaking of, let's see how much they are overpaying for GPUs. What I have done is gone through and collected the cheapest priced GPU for each model on each country's Amazon store for August 1st. Having lots of first-hand experience with Amazon UK and US, it is consistently the cheapest retailer in those regions. And although this may not be the case for all countries that we're looking at today, I've kept all searches to each country's Amazon store for some continuity between these countries. But how do the UK prices stack up compared to the United States? Well, the first thing that we're going to need to do is convert this Great British Pound amount to United States dollars. What we need to do is just simply this times, and then we're going to lock this cell reference. And there we go. And what that's essentially done is taken our Great British Pounds and converted them into US dollars. And we can just zip these down like so, which gives us the converted dollar amount from Great British Pounds. And then to see how non-US buyers are getting shafted, we need something to compare to, for which we have 2 options. We collect US GPU prices most days, and because we have such a vast amount of GPU pricing data, what we typically do is use the 10% cheapest for the time period that we're looking at to represent a good value. But the problem with that is we're comparing a single day for 5 other countries, so we're going to do the same for the US, which is August 1st. Ideally, we would have more than a single day to compare against, but this at least provides us a snapshot between the US and other countries. But later on, we will also compare these non-US prices to our comprehensive US target price, before we then find out each country's best value GPUs. But for now, that makes these the same day prices to beat here in the US, and these being the more comprehensive numbers we will compare to later. At least that would be the case if we were not missing something that may not be obvious to non-Americans. None of these US prices include sales tax, or VAT. as the US is rather unique on how it implements sales tax based on state. There are a few states with 0% sales tax like Oregon and New Hampshire, and it can go up as high as 16% for some cities in Illinois. So where you live in the US can have a big impact to the cost of a GPU. But for the purposes of this video, what we're going to do is apply a 6% sales tax to our cost, as this is the median sales tax rate here in the US, for which we can just bip that down. And we're going to do the same here, blibbity blabbity, blip. Meaning that this is a more realistic target number to be working against, as it actually includes sales tax for the United States. And with a little bit of math magic, we can turn this into this, showing that the UK was about 18.5% more expensive than the US on August 1st, with the 4060 Ti 16GB being the biggest outlier at 75% over the US price. And this is probably because there is so little stock of this card around the world. Some of these countries didn't even have any 16GB listings at all. We will do a full breakdown of which countries and which architectures are more or less expensive compared to each other and the US, but a couple noteworthy sort of mentions within the UK. A lot of RTX 4000 is quite a bit more expensive. We're looking at anywhere between 10 and 20%, apart from the 4060 Ti 8GB, which was about 6% lower than the same day in the US. But on that particular day, it was quite a bit more expensive than what's considered a good price. RTX 3000 is pretty much 15 to 30% more expensive in the UK versus US on the same day, apart from a couple options in the high end. This one being the Paladin card, which gets sold for pretty cheap actually across the board. RX 7000 has a pretty big markup in the UK, about 20% on average, and RX 6000 tends to be one of the best options here in the US at the moment, especially with big discounts going on. But in the UK, it looks like, especially in the low end, which tends to be the best value for the US, they're quite a bit higher in the UK. And ARC seems to be the biggest markup in terms of averages, but the 3090 Ti being the best price at nearly 24% cheaper than the US, but that obviously isn't going to be the best GPU to buy in terms of performance per British dollar. And I'll go over the best value GPUs for each country a little later on, as well as how each generation compares to each country, making the UK architecture breakdown anywhere from 14 to 28% over the US, being RTX 3000 and Intel Arc respectively. But the 5 best value cards in the UK were the RTX 3060 Ti, the GDDR6X version, the 7600, the 6650 XT, the 6600 and the A750. So I have added them to compare, and we'll find out which one is the best value later on. Next up for TechLens viewers by geography is Canada at number 3. And I have observation number 2 for you about the US, the healthcare system, which is both a mess and also better, but only for some people. Like Canada, where I'm from has a socialized healthcare system. If you have something wrong with you, you go to the doctors and there are very rarely any costs. However, in the US, it is pay to play. If you're lucky enough to have insurance, you still have to deal with the insurance, which is a minefield. The deductibles can easily be in the thousands. It is expensive. However, because healthcare is a legitimate for-profit business in the US, my experience is there's a big difference in how you are treated. In the US, each patient is more money, and the more you treat them, the more money you get. And compare that to the NHS, for example, where no matter how you look at it, every person you treat dwindles your pool of money, making it fundamentally detrimental to your resources to treat people. I fortunately haven't needed to visit the doctors in Canada, but let me know if you guys also have worryingly short doctor's appointments like the UK. But in terms of Canadian GPU prices, what I'm going to do is run through the highlights using our same equation, but now for Canadian dollars. And as we can see, compared to the US, Canada is only just under 3% more expensive on average, which is extremely close to US pricing. The one that almost made me alarmed that I got something wrong was the 3070 Ti, but if we double check that over for Canada, 3070 Ti, we can see that it is $457.36 shipped and sold by Amazon. So this is no mistake. $350 roughly for a 3070 Ti in Canada. That is a very good deal. But what is a bad deal is the RTX 3080 10GB at about $1,200. That is outrageously priced. especially considering that the 4080 is cheaper than that and would get you significantly more performance. In fact, RTX 4000 in Canada actually looks to be pretty well priced compared to the US on the same day, but it's worth remembering that the 4060 Ti 8GB was pretty high in the US on that day and is probably not a great representation of that price. We will go over what is a good representation and how these countries compare in a bit. But RX 7000 is on average a little bit higher in Canada than it is America, but not by a dramatic amount, compared to RX 6000, which is not insignificantly higher. We're talking about anywhere to -5% to +16.5%. but realistically averaging in the high single digits, I'd say. Which, compared to other countries, is actually a pretty good result, but is still higher than the US, putting Canada in first position by a significant margin over the UK, making the Canadian architecture breakdown anywhere from -9% for RTX 4000 to +7% for RX 6000. But in terms of the 5 best value GPUs for Canadians, we have the RTX 3070 Ti, and then it's 2 for 2 with the 7600, the 6650 XT, the 6600 and the A750. Every one of those last 4 GPUs were also in the best value list for UK shoppers, so we've also added them to compare for Canadians. Which brings us on to the next country. Guten Tag, Germany, at number 4. My great granddad was actually German, so I'm proud the UK and Germany are so high up on this list. But given that this is the first non-English language country that we're looking at, the next US observation I have for you is the language. Of course, they speak English, but there are some really odd differences. And I'm not even talking about the most popular one, the British aluminium versus the American aluminum, because the thing that I didn't know before moving to the US is that they are actually spelt differently. There is no second I in the American version, but eggplant for aubergine, arugula for rocket, none of them even come close to pestle and mortar, which in America is mortar and pestle. Something inside of me physically hurts when I hear it that way round, and I have no idea why. Let me know how you guys say it in Germany or elsewhere. Which way round is it? But in Germany, the euro is slightly stronger than the dollar, and when converted, prices in Germany end up being around 8.5% more expensive, with the 3090 Ti being the best price compared to the US, but would still be a poor choice when it comes to value of a graphics card, closely followed by the US inflated 4060 Ti 8GB on that day. But the higher end 4000 series looks to be anywhere between about 5 and 10% more expensive in Germany, and the 3060 Ti 16GB being way more expensive, 50% more expensive in Germany on that day compared to what we found in the US, likely due to the lack of stock on the card inflating the price. For 550 euros, you could get the RX 6800 XT, which would be a much better option for gaming. But we'll look deeper into that a little bit later on for each country. The rest of the 6000 series is anywhere from about 5 to 40% more expensive, apart from the 6900 XT. Typically in the US, the 6950 XT is cheaper than the 6900, but in Germany that may be the other way round, or it may just be that we caught this one a little bit cheaper and this one a little bit more expensive. But RTX 3000 in Germany actually looks pretty good. We have a couple outliers being the 3070 at plus 21% and the 3090 Ti at minus 20%, but if we remove those two, it's anywhere from about minus 5% to plus 8%, which is pretty damn close to American prices, and could see a few of these models being the more sensible option for German buyers, with RX 7000 series being about 10% more expensive in Germany, putting Germany in second place so far, and pushing the UK down even further, making the Germany architecture breakdown anywhere from plus 2% for RTX 3000 to plus 13% for RX 6000, and the 5 best value GPUs being identical between the UK and German shoppers, maybe because both countries being part of the European market, but an interesting observation nonetheless. So we'll add them to compare and figure out which one is the best value a bit later on. And leads us on to country at position number 5, Namaste, India. And the next US observation I have for you is driving. I have seen many people reversing the wrong way up a highway after missing an exit. People weaving in and out of traffic like they're playing GTA 5, that is literally every journey I take. But most of all stop signs should just be replaced with roundabouts. At least they should be, if I hadn't already come close to 10 accidents from people who have no idea how to use them. Don't get me wrong, bad drivers do live everywhere. In fact, speaking of India, I hear it's pretty bad over there. Yep, that is terrifying. Almost as terrifying as the price increase Indians are expected to pay for GPUs. A sorrow heart goes out to all of you, with an average price over 25% higher compared to the US. That is a serious price increase. Most notably the RTX 3080 12GB and also the 3070, being about 60% over the American price. So make sure that you don't get caught out by that, as faster cards like the 3070 Ti and also the RTX 4080 can be had for cheaper, even though RTX 3000 and RX 4000 are still significantly higher than the American price, on average. Other than the 4060 Ti 8GB, which is actually below its American MSRP of $399 US. In India, you can actually get it for cheaper than what you can do as an MSRP in America, which actually was quite surprising, and makes it the best price compared to the US on this entire list. RX 7000 series as well as Intel Arc, they're looked to be similarly inflated. We're talking an average of about low to mid 20s, and RX 6000 typically tends to get my recommendation in terms of price to performance. However, they look quite a bit more expensive in India, so it'll be interesting to see what the best value cards are for each country in a bit. Putting India in last place so far, with UK prices being closer to India than Germany. That is pretty sad. Making the Indian architecture breakdown anywhere from about 15 to a staggering 36% for RX 6000. That is just an eye-watering difference for Indian shoppers, and my heart goes out to you. But some of the best value cards in India are actually cheaper than in the UK, which is something you wouldn't expect just looking at the averages. And with the 6600, India also gets the 6650 XT, the A750, the 7600 and the 4060 Ti 8GB, added to the best value GPUs for that region, and they have been added to compare. And brings us on to the final country we are looking at today, before we better compare them and find out which GPU is the best value for each country. Good day, Australia? Now, this is where I deviated from the audience a little, as TechLens does have more viewers from the Philippines than it does Australia. But as we've been looking at Amazon prices for every other country, and there isn't an Amazon Philippines store, Australia has been subbed in. I am sorry, Philippines. If we do this again, I'll do it in a way that makes sure you are included. But the last US observation I have for you is actually going to be a bit different, which is impersonations, but not towards me and my Britishness, because I'm going to stand up for the Australians here. The common phrase for an Australian accent in the US is put another shrimp on the barbie. But Australians don't really use the word shrimp, it's a prawn. That's like me saying put some more petrol in the tank or God save the Queen for an American accent.
God save the Queen, man.
It's just wrong. But in Australia, prices are only beaten by Canada, being on average 6.5% more expensive compared to the US, cheaper than Germany, the UK, and India. RTX 4000 series looks to be pretty comparable compared to the US. We are only talking about single digits, apart from the 4060 Ti 8GB. RTX 3000 high-end does fluctuate in price quite a lot, leading to some big differences here. About plus 31.5% to minus 19.5%. That's quite a bit different. But the lower end seems to be a lot closer to American prices, unlike the 7000 series from AMD. We're talking about plus 20% on the high end and then 6% for the 7600. Whereas this is basically flipped when it comes to the 6000 series. We're talking 3.5 to minus 15, 5.5, 3.5. A lot of these are closer to the American prices until we get to the low end, at least this section of the low end. Because the 6600 does actually seem pretty well priced, but Intel Arc are just inflated more than they should be, because it's difficult to justify these cards in America. They have inherent issues with older games and compatibility issues, a bit buggy. We did a pretty good breakdown in this video right here of why you would want to choose one manufacturer over another. But with Intel Arc, it's quite difficult to justify them compared to something else, like a 6600, like a 3060 Ti, putting Australia in second place behind Canada and in front of Germany. making the Australian architecture breakdown anywhere from about 1% for RTX 4000 to 16% for RX 7000, and the best 5 GPUs being the 7600, the 6700, the 6650 XT, the 6600, and the A750. So we are going to find out the best value GPU for each of our countries, right after we quickly look at how each country's prices compared to our US target price, because what we have been looking at so far is the same day's listing in the US and comparing them for each and every country. Ideally, we would have more data than just one day, but it does take an extreme amount of time manually going through this process. And what we have today at least provides an example to compare. But what if we could compare non-US prices to a much larger data set of averages? How would this change? How much worse would non-US prices be? Well, this is where we can use our 10% target price for the month of July, and you can learn more about how that's collected by watching this video. This removes any US pricing outliers and gives us a much better representation of a good price in the US, which admittedly is a little bit unfair, comparing a single day for all of these countries to an entire month in the US. But there's a good reason for doing that. Comparing to the best US-based dataset of GPU pricing, we can see if something like the 9% better prices for RTX 4000 in Canada is because Canadian prices are actually better than the US, or if the US prices on that day were just inflated. Because although the difference overall does widen between the US and these countries, RTX 4000 was still cheaper in Canada on a single random day compared to the 10% best for the entire month of July in the US, potentially making Canada the best place in the world to buy an RTX 4000 series GPU right now, which is extremely surprising to somebody who assumed that all prices would just be better in the US. So as I show you the rest of the architectures versus our US July target price, let me know in the comments if the prices that I found are a good representation of pricing in your region. If this video performs well, I might try and get some help and collect global prices over a week, a month, something like that to compare to. Which means it is time to have a look at the best value GPUs for each of the countries that we've looked at and pick a winner for you guys. So let's head over to gpusmart.com, which is my website, to help you figure out which GPU offers the best value. And starting out with the UK. All we need to do is adjust the price to what we found. We're going to use the converted US dollar amount for simplicity, but you could realistically use any currency here, and it would achieve the same result, making this the list of 1080p best to worst value graphics cards. And these are the results for 1440p, with the 6600 and 6650 XT being the best value rasterization cards for UK shoppers. In Canada, there is only a $100 price difference in the top 5 best value GPUs, but which one of them claims the top spot? Well, this goes to the 6650 XT, coming out on top as the best value GPU for both 1080p and 1440p gaming in Canada. In Germany, the price gap widens to $130 difference in the top 5 best value GPUs, but the 6650 XT comes out on top again for both 1080p and 1440p. So keep an eye out for those at a good price, because even in India, the 6650 XT comes out on top again for 1080p and 1440p gaming. I know these cards are typically a great value in the US, but I didn't realize how that basically translated to them also being the best value around the world. So let's see if that changes in Australia. Well, the 6650 XT goes from first to last out of our best value GPUs, and the 6600 takes the top spot for Australia by a decent amount at 1080p. The 7600 does close the gap a bit when it comes to 1440p, but the crown still goes to the 6600 for Australia. It's crazy how much AMD dominates the value space, with only a few Nvidia GPUs making the shortlist. But that doesn't mean that you should avoid Nvidia cards altogether, as there's actually some extremely valid reasons to go for Nvidia, as we found out in our GPU manufacturer comparison, where we break down the real reasons to go for one manufacturer over another, to find out which one is right for you. And you can check that out by clicking here. Otherwise guys, share, like, subscribe, they are always appreciated, and I hope you have an amazing day.